Doc Blејлок, how you doing, man?
Doing very good. Appreciate the invitation.
The main reason I got you on the program was your recent article about the nano aluminum particles in the chemtrails, and I think it's just so important that people understand what's going on here. So could you tell me what got you interested in this, and what started you writing this this recent paper?
Well, the connection has been the aluminum in the vaccines. I wrote several articles about the effect of the adjuvants in vaccines, including the mercury and the aluminum effect. Then I found some articles about the chemtrails, and there was a lot being said about it, and I wasn't too sure whether it was true or not, because in my state we rarely saw them. But as I started looking on the internet, and I would see these states in which there were these crisscross patterns, and they were very tight patterns, and these geometrical shapes, where it was obviously it was a purposeful covering of the atmosphere with these patterns. And the trails were so long. Well, now we're starting to see them in my state, and as I look at them, they go from horizon to horizon. Well, I've been alive long enough to know that jets never did that in the past. And I see the same patterning effect now, where they're crisscrossing. It's an obvious pattern. And so I looked into the literature and some of the reports and YouTube videos, and they were saying that they were dropping one of the ingredients was aluminum. Well, I had done a fair amount of writing and research on the effect of aerosolized chemicals in the nose when you breathe them. And what we knew was that these particles tend to travel along the olfactory nerves, which are the smell nerves in the nose, and it travels directly to the part of the brain that has to do with memory and emotions, the hippocampus, the entorhinal area, and the prefrontal cortex, and that you can trace these chemicals traveling along that nerve and depositing in this area of the brain. The other thing that was known is that if you aerosolize aluminum, it's one of the metals that passes very easily along this track and directly into the brain, so it bypasses the blood-brain barrier and goes directly into the brain and accumulates. Well, if you do it in animals, it produces lesions or damage in that area of the brain, and the animal will begin to show changes of memory and learning and emotional changes. When we look at people who have Alzheimer's disease, ironically, the highest concentration of aluminum in the brain is that same entry point, what's called the entorhinal cortex, and the levels continue to accumulate. So we have compelling evidence that aerosolized aluminum alone will enter the brain and produce damage to that critical area of the brain. The worst of all is the nanosize. Now, nanosize means you make it such a small particle that it easily penetrates skin, it penetrates barriers in the body that normally metals cannot pass through. When you nanosize and produce these incredibly small particulate matter, it passes very easily. So when you nanosize aluminum and you use it in these aerosols through the nasal passages, it enters the brain in very high concentrations. And they find that the nanosized aluminum in the brain is infinitely more toxic. Now, one of the toxic reactions to aluminum is intense inflammation and activation of cells in the brain that are the immune cells called microglia. Aluminum is a very potent activator of these immune cells, and that triggers the release of a powerful substance called glutamate, which is an excitotoxin. It causes cells to die from an excitatory mechanism, kind of complex mechanism, but it is a combination of inflammation and excitotoxicity. And I coined the term in the medical literature called immunoexcitotoxicity to describe that process. So we know that occurs. We know it occurs very easily. Now, the reports are coming out now that what they're spraying is nano-size aluminum, and the idea is the whole concept of preventing global warming. And they nanosize the aluminum so it'll stay in the upper atmosphere longer. Supposedly it's a reflective compound, metal. The problem with that, even from a climatologic description, is that if you make it into cirrus-like clouds rather than reflecting it upward and out of the atmosphere, it reflects the heat downward and actually causes global warming. Now, I watched YouTube, which was a geoengineering conference that the government had put on. And in the conference, one of the questions somebody in the audience asked, well, what is the medical effect of spraying aluminum in the atmosphere? And the speaker said, well, we don't really know, but we're in the process of researching that. Well, of course, that was an absolute lie. We do know what it does.
Right.
But the fact that they were admitting that, in fact, they were going to spray, they gave it in the future tense, that they were going to spray aluminum. The evidence now from the examination by biologists and scientists around the world is that the aluminum level in the lakes and streams and trees is increasing enormously.